More than welcome. Perspective and from the Swedish government's perspective, anti-Semitism is a poison. It has been there for hundreds of years, if not for thousands of years. I'm among the people that can't really fully grasp the evil behind the Holocaust. I can never understand how it feels to be a survivor or son or daughter of a survivor that have scars for a whole life. Some conclusions I can draw from the Holocaust. One is that it would have never have happened without anti-Semitism. It might be evident to say that, but to be honest, I had quite a shocking call with the Swedish Segerstedt Institute today, telling me, because they have gone through research concerning programs in schools combating the Holocaust all around the globe. And in more than 40% of these programs, anti-Semitism wasn't mentioned. Which is, you can never explain what happened without anti-Semitism for centuries. Another conclusion for me from the Holocaust is that they have a duty to try to act, to have a duty to try to do something today. The sad thing with anti-Semitism and this kind of hate is that it has been with us all the time. We should have zero tolerance against it, but as soon as we think that we have won the battle, I think we have lost the battle. To teach kids of today about tolerance, about fighting anti-Semitism, and also Holocaust remembrance is crucial to be able to be successful in creating democratic and decent societies. Sweden is no exception. We have had anti-Semitism in our countries at least for centuries. We have had Jewish population in Sweden for a little bit more than 500 years, a little bit less in Malmo. We're coming back to Malmo soon. We have had anti-Semitism in different forms. We still have a battle when it comes to, I don't like the word traditional, but let's use the word traditional right-wing anti-Semitism and neo-Nazis. We have that problem in Sweden. We have also a challenge where we have anti-Semitic oversteps when it comes to criticizing Israel, more, to be honest, from the left wing in Sweden. And we also, and I think, sad enough, we're going to focus quite a lot on this today, we have anti-Semitism coming from people moving to Sweden as newly arrived immigrants. When it comes to the more traditional anti-Semitism, the Swedish problem from many years, I would say in the 50s, in the 60s, and the 70s, was that we were neutral in the Second World War. We tried to describe that neutrality was the higher moral ground to stand on. It was a smart way not to participate in the war, but you can never say it was a higher moral ground to be neutral towards Nazi Germany. That also meant that I claim, and many with me, that we never did really, the first decades after the Second World War, we didn't make up with our own part of the history. We didn't dig into the Race Biology Institute that we had in my hometown, Uppsala. We didn't really stand up for saying that we were actually responsible for putting J in Jewish people's passports in Sweden. We didn't discuss our own guilt. We started to do that better, I would say, in the 80s, 90s in Sweden, and matured in a way, in a way of trying to make up with our own history and draw lessons from it. Then we had a challenge, and I mentioned that with the newly arrived immigrants in Sweden, where I would say that the Swedish majority society in a way tilted, because with a simplistic logic, we feel like you can't be a racist if you're coming from another country. For some time, we didn't really address the anti-Semitism, where people came, especially from this region, Middle East, from societies where anti-Semitism is part of a majority perception. And we didn't really address that. And for that, I think I and many others are deeply sorry to people that have been victims of that form of anti-Semitism. On the positive side, we are doing much more now. And I would say we have several governments in a row that actually try to do something seriously about combating anti-Semitism. I'm proud, and this is going to be my introduction to the deputy mayor, that we also have leadership in Malmo today with the mayor, Katrin Stjernfeldt, and the deputy mayor that is here with us today, Rocco Kusar, that is really taking this battle seriously. Again, it doesn't mean that we don't have a challenge, we do have, but at least my impression is that more Jewish people today feel that they're not too alone when they are victims of anti-Semitism. That's the first step. With these words, I hope that everybody will be able to technically hear and see each other. If you are online, you need to write questions to me. One has been a good example. She wrote it even before the seminar. So Barbara is going to get a question posed later on. The people that are joining us in the room, of course, you could take the floor later and pose questions. Final point from my side, as I told some of you, the Jewish community in Sweden, the Jews of Sweden, are a national minority. 1 out of 5. The Jewish community has been living in Sweden for, as I said, at least 5 centuries. We have an obligation towards a minority to make it possible to wear your religious symbols, to speak. In Swedish case, the language we're talking about is Yiddish, actually. Yiddish is a minority language in Sweden. But to keep up the culture, to be able to walk the streets without being afraid because you're belonging to the Jewish minority. Rocco Kusar arrived to Israel yesterday. He is negative, tested at the airport, I think, so we could sit quite close. Rabbi Master David, I will come back to you. Rocco, the floor is yours to tell us about what's happening in Malmo. The title of the seminar, as you know, is Jewish Life in Malmo and the Local Battle and Combat Against Antisemitism. Welcome.
Thank you, Ambassador Ullenhag. It's a great honor to participate here at this seminar and to be able to do it physically. So a very big thank you for the invitation. Yes, anti-Semitism is a problem in Malmo, and we know that it has been a problem for a long time. The Jewish congregation has existed in Malmo since 1871. That's over 150 years. So Malmo has a Jewish history, and we are really determined to secure that Malmo also has a Jewish future. And such a goal calls, of course, for action. In 2019, the City of Malmö and the Jewish congregation signed a 4-year agreement to fight anti-Semitism and strengthen the development and the conditions for Jewish life in our city, but also to strengthen the history and the culture. Yes, Malmö faces challenges with anti-Semitism. We have started a large set of concrete measures, but we cannot pretend that we have reached our goal. That is a work that will acquire us to think in the long run and to be persistent and have endurance in that work. So the overall goal for the work that is included in this agreement that we have signed with the Jewish congregation is to strengthen the Jewish identity in our city and to fight anti-Semitism. This is extremely important to us to do it through reducing the vulnerability of the Jewish group in our city. So our goal is to achieve this by preventive work against anti-Semitism, cooperation in accordance with legislation in our operations, and collaboration in special initiatives. And through the agreement that we have signed, we have established a steering group where officials from both the municipality and the Jewish congregation are included. And they have the task to set up operational plans for every year. Examples of results of the work so far is by others, the development of the Jewish Educational Center. And this is a fully developed educational center in the synagogue that will be used by the city. Educational activities to raise issues against Judaism. And I'm sure that Felix Sierratsky, the head of communications at the Jewish congregation, will come in more into details on how they work in the educational center. The work is focused on youth and children and young people, but also on adults. But regarding our work towards children and youth in school, as a part of the agreement presented last year, analyzing anti-Semitism, racism, and conspiracy theories in schools. And this is a key factor, because knowing about problems makes us responsible to really tackle them. And I am sure that Miriam Katzin, the coordinator for combating anti-Semitism in the city of Malmo, will come in and tell us more about this work. We're also arranging trips for our pupils in school to visit concentration camps. During the school year, all schools in Malmo have been offered a trip, and already has groups from more than half of our schools in our city traveled to the concentration camps. We will also later this year have an art exhibition, Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, that will come to Malmo. And the city will also publish another report regarding how adults in Malmo experience anti-Semitism. As I said, this work also includes measures and activities towards adults. I will come back to that. Another part of the agreement that we have is about making Jewish life and culture visible in Malmo. And this is to show how diversity is a core of the city of Malmo. And then, of course, it must include the right to be a Jew in Malmo and to be a visible Jew in Malmo. Also proud that we support Amana, the Jewish-Muslim Partnership of Trust, where Rabbi Moshe David HaKohen and Imam Salahuddin Barakat aim to create a trusting society and work to counter discrimination. It is with a focus on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And Amana works with all levels of society, from schools and universities to communities and official representatives. And we will surely hear from Rabbi Moshe David HaKohen more about their work. Because the ugly face of anti-Semitism has existed in the world for thousands of years, it is really important to really learn how to decode and address it, to learn about conspiracy theories, to develop critical thinking, and also scrutinize ourselves within and outside the organization and in our society as a whole, and do it persistently and over again. This is my deep belief that we have to root out the ugly face of anti-Semitism that we have. And to do that, we need knowledge, and we need, as I said before, persistency and endurance, because this is not a problem that we can solve overnight. we'll wrap it up there and see in which ways I can later in the conversation be how do you say, be included with my thoughts, or even if I have questions that I can answer. But it will be, I just want to really emphasize that it will be both naive and dangerous to think that the problem of anti-Semitism in Sweden only exists in Malmö. We have, or our hope is that other cities and municipalities in Sweden will take similar initiatives that we have taken in Malmö. And in the most humble way I can express it, I'm very aware that we have a lot of work in front of us. It is our goal to root out anti-Semitism and to strengthen the Jewish identity in Malmö and in Sweden. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the one we had a question here, who is speaking? And I will introduce you again. Probably somebody came online. We have nice signs here, so you could see us if you're here in real life in this hybrid format. But this was Rocco Corso, that is the Rocco Corso, that is the deputy mayor of Malmö since 2018.
Since December 2018.
Yeah, December 2018. We had a little bit unclear election result there, so it took some time. But after some months, we found a majority, and thank you so much for sharing. And also to underline that you are here for the seminar, but you're also here to learn and meet people, which I think is something to salute Malmö also for, that you're actually building bridges to experts and others that you could work with in Israel. We will come back to you. Next one is also working with you. It's not the rabbi, you will come later. We have the first, he's really welcome in here. That's Miriam Katzin, who's a coordinator against anti-Semitism for the city. Miriam has also published a study concerning Jewish life in schools in Malmö and anti-Semitism in Malmö. It was quite a lot of attention to it in Swedish media a couple of months ago. I think it was published. Maybe it was published earlier. Sometimes media are late, but it was at least created a very useful and helpful discussion, I would say. Now I will need to have technical help because Miriam will present her results, so she should be able to show something on the screen, I promised you. So welcome, Miriam. Maybe we turn around so we see what's happening. Hear me? Can we hear you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. First, it's an honor to be invited to this panel, and I'm also very grateful for the possibility to present digitally, even though it would have been, of course, nice in several ways to be with you. Yes, I work as a coordinator against anti-Semitism in schools in Malmö, and I have a research background, and therefore, it was natural for me to start this work by performing a study of anti-Semitism in schools, and that has been referred to. One of the main points that I make in this study is that anti-Semitism in Malmö cannot be understood as one thing or in one form, but it has several different expressions on different levels. And unfortunately, I cannot present all of the results to you, but I will present some of them. I should also say that there is an English translation of the summary and also some of the quotes of the study, because this study is built on mostly on qualitative interviews with Jewish children and youth and with school personnel. And I will also say a few words on what we are currently doing in the administration to work towards anti-Semitism, but I should also say that it's also an important part of our work to strengthen the Jewish minority. So we look in both directions at this problem. But let me see how screen sharing works today. I hope that you can now see my PowerPoint presentation. So this is the summary: schoolyard racism, conspiracy theories, and exclusion. And I've talked to the communication office recently, so hopefully it's also available online soon, the English translation. First of all, let me say that one must recognize that in Sweden, the Jewish group is a very small minority in a majority society, which has a strong norm towards a somewhat paradoxical culture, which in research is sometimes called secular Lutheranism, meaning that there is the culture circles a lot around Protestant holidays and traditions, while religion and religiosity in itself does not have a strong place. And there are, of course, hierarchies and norms between different ways of living and celebrating. And being perceived as different and being singled out can be, of course, quite difficult for anyone, but especially for children and youth. And this experience becomes more prominent when the school often promotes certain ways of living as the norm. And several of the kids that I talked to, they raise this experience that they are being questioned for what they eat, for what they celebrate, and what they do not celebrate. And I talked to a group of children between 10 and 12, and they talked about the experience that they have regarding this issue and the fact that, for example, the school year often ends with a celebration in church. And they told me that it feels like we don't even exist. Another kid said, we're kind of like the ugly duckling. A third child said, we're kind of like Cinderella. And the fourth, sometimes I get a little upset that we only celebrated Christian holidays and had kind of Christmas decorations and stuff, that we don't have anything else, like, for example, from Judaism or Islam. So even in a city like Malmö, which is multicultural in its demographics in many ways, there's still this strong norm that, of course, also affect the Jewish children as all other minority children in the school. This, of course, shapes the experience and identities for those who belong to a minority, like the Jewish minority, even though, as the ambassador said, this is one of 5 national minorities, and it is supposed to be, the Swedish way of living is supposed to be broadened so that it, of course, includes also its minorities. But this is not the experience of the Jewish kids that I talked to. And this can, with theoretical terms, be called experiences of everyday racism, of everyday being reminded of being different. And that creates stress and experiences of exclusion in different ways. So the school has to work on a broad level with creating an inclusionary environment for the Jewish kids to feel accepted. Another central aspect that I talk about in the report is the existence of conspiracy theories. And of course, this is something which exists and has increased on a global level, and that can also be seen in the classroom. And is, according to the teachers I've interviewed, an increasingly common phenomena. And when I asked in a survey, the teachers what their experiences were regarding some very common conspiracy theories. A majority of the teachers on junior high and high school teaching kids from age 13 to age 18 said that they do meet conspiracy theories, and as much as 10% say that they meet conspiracy theories often. And this is of course a challenge on many levels. For the school, the existence of conspiracy theories creates a challenge that has to do with understanding the world and accepting the knowledge authority of the teacher in the classroom. Then, of course, it's also a problem when conspiracy theories, as they often have, a racist or anti-Semitic ground. And here we can see that this exists on a scale. When I talk to the teachers, well, they have a larger group of pupils who believe in, it's more like an associative level, that the Jews have more power over media, over banks, etc. And this can also come hand in hand, of course, with the images of the Israeli-Palestine conflict, which also is imbued with conspirational thinking. But then there exists a small group of very well-read conspirational theories that is described as kids that spent a lot of time in online milieus that maybe they are called gamers, that are often very strong believers in conspiracy theories. And these are experienced as a very difficult group of pupils to reach. They are of course radicalized in this internet environments. And the teachers also experience that they have very few tools to know how to work with conspiracy theories. It's a very multifaceted problem that has to do with relations in the classroom, relations in the society and towards the world, and ideas about the world. And for this, they are not trained. So this is a central topic that we work a lot with, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and how to handle that in the classroom. Of course, a very central and serious part of the report is the experiences of the Jewish children and youth, who often have to ask themselves whether they have to hide their identities. And of the 14 informants that I talked to, all of them had experiences of some kind. Then it differed in strength and seriosity a lot. But some even had experiences of physical attacks of anti-Semitic natures. And of course, the whole group experienced insecurity and stress regarding this issue, which of course has to do also with the nature of hate crime. Because of incidents that they have been exposed to, incidents that they have heard about from friends, family members, through the media, concerns are high about being at risk. And this affects their everyday life, it affects their identity development. And of course, they also link the present day experiences to histories and family histories and histories in the group of persecution. So hate crimes are really serious in the way that they affect the whole group's opportunities to live a life that feels free and secure, and can also lead some members of the group to choose to distance themselves from their Jewish identity as a way of safeguarding against racist attacks. I have quite a long quote from a very intelligent young Jewish person that I interviewed, and I'm going to read all of it for you because I think it tells us some very important things about this. People, above all, must feel comfortable being part of the Jewish community, that they want to be part of the whole community and connect with their Jewish identity. If you grow up without any strong connection to your Jewishness, but just hear all the swear words and prejudice and how other people look at Jews. It affected me when I was little to never want to take part in Jewish life. I missed so many years of community because I did not want people to find out that I was Jewish. And I know that many feel that way. I meet Jews all the time in Malmö who have never been part of the whole community because they feel that it's embarrassing to tell people that they're Jews, since you're grown up with everything you hear. Those who today can feel really proud are those who have been in it for so many years, who belong to the community, who can get support and so on. Those who have not been given the opportunity to take part in the Jewish community, they will disappear further and further away from their Jewishness. That is also an effect of anti-Semitism. So there is a vicious circle here, of course, that experiences of anti-Semitism drives you away from your Jewish identity, and then you will not get the support that you otherwise could have got from the Jewish community to be able to have positive strategies. And I think that this is also a very important lesson for us as a municipality, that working towards anti-Semitism must also include working to strengthen the Jewish community as a way to provide secure spaces for the Jewish kids, but also as a way to show the positive aspects of the Jewish identity. It is not only, we are not only Jews as being victims of anti-Semitism, but there is also a strong and positive side to this community. This is something about our action plan in school. And I think the most important thing to say here is something that is very central in research about school development. To be successful, integration in the ordinary work of schools is key. So you cannot arrange a theme day a year or just go on study visits. That has to be integrated into the everyday work in the schools. And that, of course, means that teachers and schools must have the keys of integrating. And that is also quite apparent in my report, that knowledge is lacking and strategies, and sometimes even, in some cases, even the priority in an everyday work in school where there are many problems. This is one that does not get priority. Another key thing is that it's easy to focus on the most extreme cases and to work with remediation when things have already happened. But we think that we have to start at the other end. We have to start with promoting a society with inclusion, with tolerance and love for one another. We have to prevent racism before it happens. And that is also, as Rocco Kursa said before, an important starting point for us when we see this as a long-term commitment. To be more concrete, what we do, first of all, schools must work on a broad base with values and democracy. And we arrange trainings for teachers, and we're also part of DEMBRA, a democratic resistance against racism and anti-Semitism. This is a project that was developed in Norway, but now has also moved to Sweden, and Malmö is proud to be a pilot municipality for this project. Step 2 is to provide more knowledge for schools and teachers. And for that, we arrange trainings, and we also develop teaching guides, which we make available for all teachers. And then we have this important cooperation with the Swedish Committee Against Anti-Semitism that has a very important education program that we are part of. And as Mr. Kursar said, more than half of our schools are already involved, and several more are on their way into this education program. And third of all, we have to also work on the Jewish group as a national minority, strengthen the knowledge of Jews in school. The image of Jews in school is often very limited to religious education or religion education and to Holocaust education. But all the different images of present-day Jewishness in Malmö and Sweden is quite absent. So we develop teaching guides that portray the Jewish minority of today, and we talk a lot about this. And we are also cooperating with, of course, with the Jewish Learning Center and the Jewish congregation in this work. And I'm happy to answer any questions, of course, on this later. Thank you.
Let's first give the perspectives. The study you made in Malmo, the last one was extremely important, I think. And many of the conclusions you are drawing in that study is something that we need to learn from, not only in all Swedish cities, but also around in other countries, I think. I should have said it in the beginning. It has been a lot of focus on Malmo for 10, 15 years, rightly so. At the same time, what you are doing to try to combat anti-Semitism, it's a duty for other Swedish municipalities to also follow what you are doing. Some of the good things you're doing need to be spread to other cities in Sweden. Still, the challenges are huge in Malmö, but we have challenges all around the country, and cities of Gothenburg and also Stockholm and some of the suburbs also have challenges today. With this, I would like to introduce Felix Sierratsky, who is part of the Jewish community in Malmö. Felix is a former journalist and communications consultant. He's now founder and manager of an initiative concerning Jewish identity, tradition, culture, and history, and to counter anti-Semitism. Fredrik and I spoke with each other a couple of weeks or maybe months ago, and I just told you that say whatever you want, because this is the perspective also of the Jewish community. And speaking, we will also hear from the rabbi later on, and also from some other voices from Malmö. But Fredrik, thank you so much for joining us. I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's working as well as for Miriam. That's great, because otherwise I would be able, it would be necessary for me to tell what I suppose that you would say. It's better to hear from you. Welcome from Malmö directly.
Thank you. I lost you for a second, so I didn't know if there was a special question going on there, or should I just talk a little about where we are at right now in the community and the learning center? I can do that. And I can also, maybe you talked a little about our background. I can start maybe with our background. I was born in Malmö. My parents were survivors of the Holocaust, like many of us who are now children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of survivors. We comprise the majority of the community of Malmö, the Jewish community of Malmö. And when I grew up, anti-Semitism was something of the past, something that my parents have experienced in the most raw and visceral or dangerous nature. And we kind of lived in a kind of not a paradise, but certainly a very, very calm environment, grew up in a calm environment. And this kind of cocoon, if you will, kind of ended in the end of the 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. Where I felt when I moved back to Malmö after having lived outside of Malmö and other places in Stockholm, among other things, other places. And I felt that something had changed. Anti-Semitism was really something that Jewish people in Malmö felt, not only in Malmö, but because it was now, once again, my home community. And this has been kind of on the agenda, not only for us, but also, sadly, when I come to Israel, if I say I come from Malmo, and you will probably pick up on that, people know where Malmo is today because of that. Not only because of it's a beautiful city and it's very close to the continent and so on and so forth. So, so kind of this lull of about 70 years or so, 65, 70 years, kind of changed, and we have to do something about it. And as you very good mentioned, something happened after having kind of talked about these things and tried to gain some attention about these things. I think that we kind of things changed some years ago, and this ended up in this cooperation that we have together with the City of Malmö. What we feel here is one of the things that you've touched is, of course, education. So one of the things that I'm now head of is the Learning Center, which is our part, if you will, of this cooperation. We've set up a Learning Center for pupils, students from schools, from the lowest grades up to university. And they can come to our interactive presentations. We have 3 programs, which are directed, first of all, towards people who want to, learning about the Jewish traditions. And then we have one about anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, which tries to focus on the stories from our community and our other community and from history. So the students or the kids will kind of understand how anti-Semitism has affected us and how it has changed, but it still is the same in some sense. And also we have a focus on the 360 degrees experience of Judaism. Jewish culture, Jewish identity, Jewish civilization as basically something positive. As someone mentioned, when you think about Judaism, most often you think about either Holocaust survivor or maybe an Israeli soldier or a person, a Hasid in the Mea Shearim quarters or something. Judaism is much more, of course. We try to give them that. And that's one of the things that education is part of this, of the countering anti-Semitism. This is something we do, as you've mentioned, together with the City of Malmö. We developed these programs together with the City of Malmö, the Forum for Living History, which is a government forum, which have educators who could help us. And most of all, which is very important, they get to meet a Jew, a young Jew, because our guides are young people, part of the community, young Jewish people who are not much older than the kids they're meeting, and we're trying to educate them. And they can ask questions because some of them haven't even met a Jew before. Are you Jewish, really? You don't look funny, you don't look Jewish. It's kind of one of the questions that I get. Well, we come in all shapes and forms. And so we need to kind of get them, the meeting is very important. And of course, to meet the hard questions also, because there will come hard questions. So these are the things that we're doing from our part. And we are also seeing that we need to work together with the school authorities to create a kind of a way of creating a coherent education. Sending kids to the concentration camps, a program before they go and after, coming to the synagogue, to the learning center, and also provide help with the pedagogic, the teaching programs, which now are being developed in Malmo together with the educational authorities. And I think these are the things we can do. And I think also, which Miriam is pointing at, we have a vibrant community. It's a small but vibrant community. We need to strengthen the identity of ourselves, of our kids. So we are investing a lot in that. And we've now refurbished our community house to be able to host more parties, more learning sessions, more Shabbat dinners, and do a lot of good things, because that's the best way to counter. I mean, to strengthen ourselves is one of the great ways to counter this. So we're doing a lot of things. And we can pick up, I won't be too lengthy, we can pick up on one or two of them if you want, or you can ask me questions. And I, of course, have been one of the persons who started from early on working together with Moshe David to start up Amena. I was there in the background because I thought it was one of the key elements was to create trust with the Muslim community, which is not one community. It's many different communities, multi-language community, and we need to reach out, and we need to have a dialogue, and we need to work together. And I've also been able to meet Siavosh and his youth groups who have come to us, and I hope that Siavosh will talk a little about that. So we're doing a lot of things. The Jewish community today is about 500 people strong, but there are, I would say, about 1,500 Jews living in, not only in Malmo, but the surrounding areas. So there are a lot of people who are not part of the community, some of them don't have a strong identity. And unfortunately, some of them have been afraid sometimes to come to the community. And I think that's really sad. But I think we have also become a much more inclusive community for the last 10, 15 years, which is something that I welcome very much. So that's a little about us and what we're doing right now. And we're now receiving kids coming to us, and we're having these programs, and we want to expand this to be able to receive everybody who wants to learn more about the Jewish experience, about our history, about our culture, about our traditions, but also about the sad things, about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. I hope you heard it.
You heard it perfect. Now you hear me as well, which simplify if I should pose a question to you. Thank you so much for joining, Fredrik, and thank you so much for telling a lot of the things you are doing. Maybe a blunt question, but you have been active. You were born in Malmö. Your parents were Holocaust survivors. You have been quite active in the debate. I think I met you first time when I went to a Kippa walk almost 10 years ago in Malmö. I want to try to make it more known and show solidarity to known about anti-Semitism and show solidarity with the Jewish community. It's going in the right direction. Maybe very blunt, but if you speak to you have 500 members of the community, and you have 1,500 Jewish people in Malmö. To underline something for our Israeli friends or people watching online is what Miriam said, that Sweden is a weird society in many ways. One weird thing is that we are a super secular society. You could be a secular state, but you don't need to have a secular society. But Sweden is a very secular society. If Rocco, as a politician, should say "God bless Malmö" in the election campaign, I can say that you could say goodbye to your seat in the city council, because that's gonna people are gonna think you're crazy. So of course, when you speak of the Jewish,
you can say that to me.
Yeah. But you don't. In Malmö, so he doesn't care about you. No.
Yes, I do.
No, but so you have this group that are active in but you also have a big secular group, of course, among Jewish people. But is it going in the right direction or not?
Well, that's a good question. If you look at the numbers, over the last 20 years, we've seen a decrease in our community's membership, even though we have liberalized, in a sense, the rules for becoming a member of the community. You can become a member of the community even if you have only have a Jewish father, so to speak. Not only following halakha, the Jewish law, when it comes to becoming a member. That doesn't mean that you have full religious rights, of course. So we've done a lot of things, but we've seen that many Jews have left Malmo, that's for sure. And anti-Semitism has played a role. For others, the very fact that the number of Jews has decreased have made them leave, because they maybe want to have their kids grow up with the Jewish school, to go attend a Jewish school and bigger Jewish environment. So this has created kind of if you will, rings on the water. When we see also grandparents have moved to be closer to their grandkids. So these are the effects, of course. So we've seen a decrease. Now, we're very happy that for the last 2 years, at least, we've seen a stop in the decrease. And that's and there are some new members coming in, people who feel that they want to be part, they maybe feel more connected to the Jewish identity and they want to be part of the community, which is wonderful. So, but looking at the 20-year perspective, there's no doubt that the number of Jews in Malmo has decreased, at least committed Jews, which is sad, of course. But we are living in the here and now, which is a very Jewish thing. We can't just, sit down and cry. What we can do is, of course, continue and what we've been doing for the last years to create a vibrant community. And we have a lot of people who are giving their heart and soul to the community, which I think is wonderful. So, and also Moshe David has created a lot of platforms for us also to do a lot of good stuff, among other things. That's a long answer. I should be a politician.
Black or white always is gray sometimes. So thank you for the answer, and also for helping me introduction Rabbi Moshe David HaKohen. This might sound weird, but I'm always happy when I meet you, and that might also be an explanation that at least you have not decreasing. You're not decreasing anymore in the Jewish community in Malmo. Maybe you have played a part of it, being a rabbi there. Moshe David is sharing your time between Israel and Malmo, you could say. You are the rabbi of the Jewish community there, but you're also co-founder of the project Amana, where you work with the Muslim community in Malmo. And thank you so much for joining. I'm happy, sending these good vibes in the room that I'm happy to share with the people online. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And maybe to sum up a bit of, we've heard so many different words, I think, so far, even to try to get a picture for those who are from outside. What is the truth, right, about the situation? And what are the key factors in order to create a future, a better future in the wonderful community? And I'd like to start by saying that this very seminar proves that things are hopeful. I think it's not to be taken for granted that at many different levels, what we've heard so far is that we actually want to deal with the problem. We want to face it. We want to see what can be done, and that's at all levels, from the ambassador to the city to the Jewish community. You have people stepping up and saying, we want to see what can be done and how we can work together in order to do so. And having a presentation like we just had from Miriam, you see the situation, but you also see that there's so much effort being done to actually try to see how to tackle. One of the key words that we heard, and it was in the title of this seminar itself, is Jewish life. So many times we focus on anti-Semitism, and we forget the factor of life itself. We forget the factor of Jewish identity, as we heard from Miriam, that how do we set a place in which the Jews can feel proud of who they are? And I think that this is a very important step to bring forward, to have such a conversation and to see what can actually be done. I think also that I feel personally among friends here, both in this physical room, and that we have someone to go to, which is something that was not there in the past. We all know of previous politicians in the city who did not act in that way towards the Jewish community, and created a very bad reputation for the city, if I may say so, by a statement that they had made. That is not the case today. I had a conversation once with an organization, and they came to Malmo for a visit, and they said a lot of negative things about the city. And they said, prove to me what the city is doing. And I think in that sense, when we look today and we say, is there something actively being done in the city of Malmo to actually reach out and see how to work together. But not only how to, many times you have organizations working against anti-Semitism, but they don't actually listen. Here you have the city coming forward and saying, we are listening to you as a community. We want to hear what needs to be done. And as effect of that, we have the Jewish Learning Center that has been set up. And if it was not clear enough from Frederick's words, again, we're all here friends and know each other, I think, very well, which is in a sense a great thing. But Frederick, we have, I think the numbers, you can correct me, we have 5,000 students or more from the surroundings who come to the synagogue to learn about Judaism through the synagogue. And it used to be old school style. You had a guide who explained about, now it's very relatable to those who are coming. And a key element, which I wanted to use that word relatability, because at the end of the day, anti-Semitism will not be solved until you manage to activate those surrounding us to realize that it is their problem, not ours. Anti-Semitism, and it's not a Jewish problem. It is a problem, it's something which shows it's a factor of a healthy society or a not healthy society. And therefore, the focus for an anti-Semitism is how do we create an understanding in the society that there must be action taken to step up, and we heard that from Miriam's report as well. It's very difficult. We had a specific case last year in May, in which a school, which is known as a very good school, and this was followed very closely on media in Sweden, through national media as well. We had a specific case in which a Jewish girl was targeted day after day. And I went there to the school with the imam, who we'll talk about soon, and we went there. And after we spoke to the class, not about what was happening to the girl, but why this is an effect of a larger problem in society. And I think we got the message across that was in a way that the students could feel it was their problem. So then the teacher came out after us and he said, do you think I should have a discussion with the kids about what has been happening? You've been having a child in your classroom harassed day after day, and now you wake up and say, oh, well, maybe we should talk about it. And that's one of the biggest challenges I think that we face, that you don't want to talk about the problems. You want to leave them where they are, and to have a plan in which teachers feel comfortable and have the tools to step up is very important, as we heard before. But the larger issue, I would say, is the question of, we have a complex situation, as was mentioned here before, a rise of anti-Semitism as a result of tensions that were brought forward from the Middle East, from the Israel-Palestine into Malmo. But what did they set into? They set into a society in which there is a general sense of otherness. And we can hear, I'd like to hear how you feel about that. But we heard about the secular society, but the secular society in Sweden is not so defined of what it is for them to be a secular society. So in that sense, when someone comes with strong roots and says, this is who I am, you end up in a clash. So the general tendency is to say, just keep it at home. Just keep everything at home, keep who you are at home. When I look at the Jewish community and the future of the community, that will not work. Because when you have those two things combined, you have the fact that people cannot go on a bus with a Magen David on there openly without being afraid that they will be harassed, combined with the fact that they are not appreciated for who they are in the society. So why will the youth want to be a part of that? A basic stage, and when we were all teenagers, we want to feel part. We want to be proud of who we are. We had a discussion once with Malmo Stad that I hope can go with the city of Malmo, that I hope can go forward further. How do we create appreciation for all cultures in the city itself? In other words, the Jewish Learning Center does that in a way, but if we could not only talk about multiculturalism in the city as is done, but actually create a plan so that people appreciate what the Jews have contributed to Swedish society, for example, as other minority groups as well. And that brings me to the issue, or to our organization that has I think really come a far way from where we started just a few years ago. The project Amana, which is also supported by the city of Malmo, is a project in which the Jewish community came forward instead of backwards. How many times can we, how many protective windows can we create without choking ourselves? I feel it every time I step into the synagogue, there's a sense there's no airflow here because there's bulletproof windows. There's no life. The plants in the synagogue are fake because there's no air. I think symbolically that is a question that we can ask ourselves. How much, if we're overprotective and keep protecting ourselves, at the end we're choking life itself. We have to step forward towards solutions and towards partnerships as well. And in a fascinating way, I would say, the challenges that I just described are faced very similarly by the Muslim communities as well, but no one ever spoke to them in that way. The Muslim communities face an issue of their own identity, of being accepted into society, of stereotypes that they are facing. I had a lecture last night with somewhere here in Israel, and brought forward this issue of the partnership, and said basically that when we talk about anti-Semitism and we don't mention Islamophobia, then we're not recognizing the larger issues at hand. Over-focusing on your own problem won't solve the larger problem. And in that sense, it also blocks you from partnerships which are possible. And since specifically in Malmo, I think that the Muslims and Jews face similar problems at the society level, we can actually form partnerships that are even stronger than the political tensions that exist, which do exist. Last Thursday, I think also Jewish media in general has fit into that in this ongoing portrayal of Malmo as a failing city. We had this last year, the Malmo Forum, when the prime minister at the time said, let's have it in Malmo. They actually asked the Jewish community what we thought about it. And we thought it was a good idea. But then the whole media was, oh, you're whitewashing, you're washing your laundry, you're just pretending that everything is good. So we have this ongoing negativity, which actually doesn't help us in the Jewish community at all. And then you go back to say, well, Jews felt it, and it's almost a copy paste of media articles that are 15 years old all of the time. There's never the discussion that we're having here and now, as Frederick said, what is the situation? And I think to step forward and see the challenges, but also can be done. But when I had this lecture last night and mentioned Islamophobia, one of the people there said, well, the truth is, well, you can say that you can't even equate the two because anti-Semitism is all fake, whereas Islamophobia is credible because you know that there are issues with the Muslims. That is a type of, in other words, you're stepping into the same ground that you're trying to fight against by stereotyping. And when I came to Malmo 5 years ago, I learned that when you talk about the Muslims, there's 13 different ethnic groups that you're talking about. The Bosnian imam, for example, that is a close friend of mine, grew up in a concentration camp with armband on him, going and looking out for potatoes in the forest so that his mother and sister, who he saw raped in front of his very eyes, could survive. So those are 12,000 of the Muslims that we are talking about in the city. European, grown up in Bosnia, and are very specific. And how can you even relate to the personal trauma that some have coming from war zones to others who have not? How do you connect the Somali community? The mosques are very connected to the different ethnic groups. That's how it's built in the city. So there's no way to even compare with the different experiences that they have that we call the Muslims. So Amana was created. Amana is a root word, a Semitic root word, which is based in trust, which exists both in the Islamic, a very strong notion in the Islamic tradition, in which in their Torah Sheba'al Peh, in the Hadith, in the oral tradition, Muhammad says that there is no one can have faith if he is not trustable and trustworthy. And that is a basic element that if you say this word to anyone in the Muslim world, amana, that it's not about Muslims. It's how do I live as a trustable and trustworthy person? How do I create trust? Within the Jewish tradition, it's of course that as believers, we believe in good and we believe in trust, and we try to create a trustworthy world and trusting relationships. So coming from that point, I was very lucky to find an imam who was able to receive the full representation of the Muslim communities in order to come forward and create this partnership between the Jewish and the Muslim community. I think that relationship is very fundamental and important, but also the representation that you have, that when you, and one other element, we've been going out to schools, we have a joint community learning program with the Muslim and Jewish communities, pre-Corona times. We didn't want to do it digitally. It's not the same. Just imagine yourself for 1 second, step into Malmo and after what you have heard, and you step into a beautiful conference room and see Muslims and Jews and others as well, sitting and learning together and appreciating their knowledge and their traditions and their roots. So we have this communal program, but when we hear of issues, then we go and face them. The imam coming from the background that he can actually face the problems in a different way, but we also go to schools regularly. And when things happen, we realize the importance of standing up for one another and not only for ourselves. This last Saturday, we just had, again, very unfortunately, the same provocateur, Danish provocateur, Paludin, who burned a Quran in the middle of the city of Malmo. He's trying to show that integration is not possible. So he's trying to provoke the people to be angry. And it's very important that our message is that we as Jews understand what that means. We had the same issue the last time we tried to do this, in which we had a fantastic manifestation in which all of the politicians of the city came to Ruzegard Mosque, a so-called no-go zone in Tzvi Chezkeli's portrayal of Malmo, a place where I was just last Thursday. And we had stepping up and saying, this is not the way forward for our society. And I think that messaging is very important because it's not about the Muslims. When I stood there in the mosque itself, I quoted Heinrich Heine saying, a place where books are burned, people will be burned. And if we are over-focused just on ourselves, we have not learned the lesson of history. And in our work in the schools, what we try to do is to be relatable. I'll give one short example, but you'll have to stop me because when my time is up. For one short example, we were in a school in which we asked the question that just as we heard from Miriam's report, we asked the question as we do, how many people in this classroom, there was no Jew in the room besides me. They've never met a Jew before. We asked the question, how many of you have heard Jew jokes? I would say 80% raised their hands. How many of you have experienced discrimination? They all raised their hands. So when you talk about, and we began the lecture, and I showed them a picture of Kristallnacht and tried for them to understand, okay, what are we seeing here? And it took a while. They didn't even know what it was. And then one of the kids said, it must have been there must be a synagogue burning. But then the point was, I asked them, who is standing around the synagogue? And they said, it must be Jews. I said, no, it's not Jews. My wife's grandfather was in Kristallnacht. He was running for his life and clobbered over his head during that event. He was not standing around watching the synagogue burn. So who is standing around? And we slowly got to the point that it was the regular German in the society who was standing and just watching it go ablaze. And I said to them, that is you. Because when you have this level of discrimination in society and you stand around and are silent, then you are that silence which allows those provocateurs to actually voice and have a lot of effect. Unfortunately, in Sweden as well, we have these bloggers who just write these very, simplistic black and white, made a lot based on conspiracy theories, and they pick up trend and and everyone believes in them. If it's against Jews, if it's against Muslims, if it's against everyone else, and then that becomes the mode in society. Social media as well picked up. During May, I was in a school, in that same school, in another class, and I asked, how many of you have seen something from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on social media? 100%. How many have seen violence? 100%. But we've lost the adult in the room. The adult in the room in Sweden, if it's a teacher, is now silent, and the parents at home are silent, and then that is what is influencing. And the last thing that I will say is the importance of how do we affect and go back so that the kids take this discussion back to their dinner table conversations with their parents. Because that's where the problems lie, and that's where we have to head into the challenge. If I were to ask myself, are we heading in the right direction? The Jewish community is doing so much for its own future. I think the city of Malmo is doing a lot in terms of the partnership, and hopefully we can through this partnership do even more. I think the fact that we're having this seminar is fantastic, and I hope this can open minds and to conversations of how to actually really find the way together to put the messaging out to create a better society in which the Jewish community can thrive.
I want to stop you, but now I stop you. Thank you so much. And just to underline the importance of what you did together with the Muslims and the political leadership in Malmö, the level of anger that can be created if somebody coming from Denmark and burning the Quran, if not society react together, is huge. And you managed to handle a quite tough situation. You did it, the political leadership in Malmö did it, and a lot of people went out on the streets together. I think it meant tremendously much for the city of Malmö, and actually also for Sweden, because that could have created so much unnecessary anger. And he turned out a little bit to be on his own, this guy, but he could have got a lot of followers if the city would have...
His worst case scenario is to see the society together with the Jews and the Muslims all together, because that is what they don't want to see. So that picture in itself, I think, was very important and has to continue, because these extremists will continue and we have to together fight against them.
Så det var, tack så mycket.
Varsågod.
Thank you. And last but not least in the panel, and then we'll open up for questions and comments. I have read all the comments that come in from online, and I will post these questions, but we also have an extreme, not big, but an extremely group in the room that I would like to also give the floor if you're interested in a while. The last one in the panel is Felix Sierratsky. Felix is the founder and chair of Young People Against Anti-Semitism and Xenophobia. Started the first organization, I think it was 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when anti-Semitism was really high on the agenda in Malmo. And also arranging trips for young people to concentration camps and death camps, and are trying to make a difference on the ground. The floor is yours, Felix.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Can everyone hear my voice, I hope? Just want to say thank you for this opportunity. I also believe in this seminarium that we can speak and have this panel, but also what's happening next after this panel. And also I want to thank the ambassador to have me on board. I know a couple of years ago we met the first time when you gave me Royal Wallenberg Award. So that was also something special for me. I just want to say, first of all, me myself, I've been in Israel a couple of times. I'm Muslim, proud. Grew up in Malmo, a city that, you know, is famous for two other things, falafel and Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I also want to add also what Frederick said about this reputation Malmo has, is when you're outside Malmo, and we don't speaking about only, you know, abroad, I mean also outside Malmo, is that, oh, Malmo, where are you from? From Malmo. You know, it's a very dangerous city. Or they will say, Malmo, the anti-Semitic city. So it's also very important to say that this is not only a Malmo issue, this is a whole society issue. So this is everywhere. 2010, I was starting this organization when I was a student at my school. And why I started to do the concentration camps to make education trips is because from my childhood, when I grew up, my best friend was a Jew and me as a Muslim. So who was always stood up for me as a Muslim was my Jewish friend from my childhood. But when I was already, you know, 9, 10, 11 years old, I always saw witnesses how anti-Semitism is on the street of Malmo. And what was very important to understand is that it was so much denied about the Holocaust. And I was very sad because when I was 13 years old and 15 years old, it was actually first time my father took me to Dachau in Munich and to Auschwitz when I was 15 years old. And for me, it was very important to teach the classmates that this can happen again. And of course, we saw what's happened for 25 years ago in Europe, in former Yugoslavia. So that's why it's very important to understand and building bridge between minorities here in Malmo. And the first time I told my teacher, you know, we need to make this trip. And he asked me why. I said, it's so important to educate about Holocaust, but also what's happened today, but between also building bridge between these minorities, especially to create role models and youngsters to each other. But what everyone youngster needs today in the world is actually a good role model. So that was my thoughts to start with, but I didn't know that I'm gonna start an NGO 2010, and then 13 years later, I'm gonna still working with questions. And you also need to understand the situation, the developing in the city as a Malmo is that when I started 2010, I would say honestly, I think I was the only one in Malmo or in the South who was working with these questions. But now 13 years later, you see that we have, you know, from the local government that they're making some, you know, something right, and the struggle with this question. We see more and more, you know, individual people standing up, but also that we see this bridge between a rabbi and imam. And that was something that we didn't have before. So just imagine when I was starting this, I was by myself, but now I see the whole cities working with these questions together. And that's something beautiful to speaking about. And when I decided to do these trips, it was very important also to understand what's going to happen next. And of course, I start to bring this, I would say, students. We make the trip first time ever to Auschwitz. We came back to Malmo and back to the reality. I didn't know that 10 years later, I'm gonna lose my friends. I'm gonna lose my, you know, neighbors. People start to speak very bad about me. And also I get a lot of death threats. So you need to understand this question. Sometimes I think about myself, why I'm doing this? Actually, 3 weeks ago, was a friend of mine asked me, why you have still, you know, continue to combat anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, still, you know, building bridge and make these trips to visit Holocaust concentration camps. And I said, because I believe in humanity. I believe that we can be together, but also that we need to, you know, educate our next generation. And just imagine when you get a lot of these death threats, that you was thinking, why am I doing this work? I can be maybe in Miami, you know, drinking pina colada, sitting at the beach, but I struggle with this question because I grew up with these questions, you know? So this is so important to struggle with, but also make a change together. So what we have been doing actually today is still that we make these trips to concentration camps. We also actually make trips to former Yugoslavia to show them what's happened in Srebrenica, but also what's happening in Jasenovac. And also that we do activities and have a dialogue between these youths. We also visit the Jewish community that we met with Frederick, and that's a very, very good conversation we have with Frederick and Peter Vig, that we have like a round table. So because some of these kids, it's actually the first time they ever met a Jew. And I know it's the opposite as well. So it's first time maybe, they have this conversation together. We don't say that people gonna be the best friends over one night, but it's important to understand and have this dialogue, and that we can continue and have this dialogue for our city, what is wrong, what is right. And what we're also doing is that we create what we're calling role models, young leaders, so they can be ambassador for the society. And how do we recruit them? We did the normal one, the traditional. We go to schools, speak with schools, teachers, students. The second one, we have maybe someone in this organization or our former young ambassadors who has a friend, neighbor, family relatives, so want to be part of this ambassador program. Or something that we do, our own researchers, that we, walking around Malmo, speak with youngsters, say, how are you? What are you going to do tomorrow? Just come and have this conversation. So it's very important that you can build it individual. And I know in Sweden, they don't like so much, individual. It's always a team. And you start to work with this individual to make this team together. And that's very, very important. So we can create this youth leaders to be a good role model for each other. And once of time, I asked my good friend of mine if he want to come out with me to schools actually and have lectures about integration, diversity, but also about anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And he is Jewish himself. And then he told me, why am I gonna come with you? I said, well, because you need to share your story because you grew up with me. So this is my friend from my childhood. And then he said, you need to understand, as far as my family still lives in Malmo, I will never go out to public and speak about I'm a Jew. So this is the reality we always, see and meet it. I would say in the corridor, in the schools, on the streets, on social media. And like the rabbi said about this politics when it's come to Israel-Palestine conflict, you see it all over the place. When you see it on social media, then you understand you're going to see it on the street. When you see it on the street, you're going to see it on social media. So we also need to be active on social media to I would say, to have the right tools to combat this anti-Semitism. So what is also very important to do is when we make these trips and coming back, you need to make something more. So that's why we always have this, that we travel around schools with our young ambassadors so they can give them the right tools, they can educate them each other, but also that we can meet other minority groups and have this conversation. I don't say again that we're gonna solve all the problems because it's nothing you solve over one night, but we have been doing this in 13 years old. And we're not a local government, NGO, or get fundings from the government or from our community. We're independent. So we're always working with foundations that we maybe get fundings from or private donations, because you always have companies actually who want to be part of it and want to be, I will say, fight against these hate crimes. And that's why it's also good that you can start to speak with, I will say the companies, because that does also make something change. So you don't only change on the grassroots team or on the politician, but also on the highest level. And I also want to add that you need to understand the politicians about the Malmo before, for me, I will be honest, it was very hard for me to, come to a meeting in City Hall and have the meeting with some politicians though. It was easier for me to have meeting for the White House people, to meet with former President Obama or, with Erik Ullenhag, who was the minister then. It was much easier for me. But then I will say a couple of years ago, a good friend of mine, Rocco Kursar, who's the deputy mayor right now in Malmo, actually doing a lot of change. I'm not saying it because he's a friend of mine. I'm saying it because he's doing it from his heart and he's, he want to do something on it. So, and it's so beautiful also to see that, I will say the first time ever, I see the whole city coming together to fighting this as a team, as a, you will say, teammates, because this is not only a Malmo issue or Swedish issue, this is a whole European, the world issue. So we need to start on the schools to do something more in the future. So for us, the question will be, what is next? what will we do? How will we continue? We will still continue doing our work, what we do, the traditional, to make these activities, to create the young ambassadors, young youth leaders, and make the trips to concentration camps. But I will also make a shout out to my friend and colleague in London, name is Sad Singh. I think it's even attend maybe in this audience, that we will have a new, I will say, unique project together from this year, because he's an IVLP alumni and I am IVLP alumni from the state, US State Department. And what we will do, we will actually doing through, I will not say which team, but we will make through the sports. So we will use the soccer, football as a platform, because when you go through this organization on this, sport, especially football, then it will be much, much dynamic, and you will actually fight against these questions on the highest level. And that's why I already have a couple of teams ready. I cannot tell you right now which one it will be, but you will definitely read it on news and see it on television. And will actually put Malmö on the, I will say, on the map on the highest level. And what is very important is that if we're gonna still, I would say, struggle, but combat anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, we need to combat it together as a team, and we need to start from the children and just growing, and still make this change together. So I also want to say that we have something new project going on, that it's me and a Holocaust survivor, Stefan Zablocki, and his two beautiful children, Don and Dalia, and also a researcher, historian named Tommy, that we will actually create a new book that will, I will say, bring Stefan as a Holocaust survivor, his story, that we can actually giving away, but working with the City of Hall, I hope, of Malmo, that we can start to educate, I will say 8 or 9, or I say 8 or 9, 14, 15 years old, the students, that they can start to read about his story, but also that we still continue and speak about the Holocaust and educate them about Holocaust. Because when I started this organization 12, 13 years ago, Stefan was the first one I invite. And then we have another one, a beautiful woman name is Leah Gleitman, that's also amazing role model, who is a Holocaust survivor. And these two have been very closely working with us. And it's so important that we still talk about their story and showing the world and teaching the schools that their story is very important. And that's why we want to do it. For this will be the next step as well. So, and with that, I will say thanks again. And it's a big honor for me, big opportunity to be in this panel. And I hope to visit Israel very soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Sierratsky. Great to see you again. If you deliver Zlatan Ibrahimovic to your football games, that's going to be great. I will attend, I promise you. Since you're both from Malmo, you were born in Malmo, yes?
Oh, yeah. Grew up in Malmo, stayed in Malmo, love in Malmo. I'm still here, yeah.
So we'll see what he could do. So we raise expectations there a little bit. And as Sierratsky said, he was a laureate of the Raoul Wallenberg Prize in Sweden, what he started 10 years ago. Is it anyone in the room that wants to like to take the floor? We have Erik. Erik has raised his hand, but before letting the panel in again, I will open the floor in the room. Yes, now we see it's Carol, isn't it? I have the sun in my... Right. Yeah,
I'll take it up.
And from ADL, Carol Nuriel, thank you so much for joining. And please, after that we have Fredrik, and then I'm going to put in some voice from online with some questions. But Carol, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ullenhag, and I really want to commend you, first of all, for convening all of us to talk about it. And I would encourage every ambassador in Israel just, to bring the issue of anti-Semitism. I don't know if you are all aware, but it also contributes to a very important conversation taking place in Israel about the relationship between diaspora Jews and Israelis, which is not, that's not a priority, let's put it this way, for the Israeli society. I also think that I like the balance also of, putting a focus on anti-Semitism as a unique phenomenon, as the oldest hatred and so on, but also not losing sight, as you say, Rabbi Hakohen, not losing sight of the bigger picture where anti-Semitism takes place, which is, an environment that, extremism and other forms of racism or more specifically Islamophobia are taking place, and that's very. I have a question, and I think that my question is more directed to Dr. Katin. So all the measures that we heard about are extremely important, and thank you so much, Deputy Mayor, for really taking so much action against anti-Semitism. But how do you make sure that, school children, that adults are paying a price for being anti-Semitic, for using anti-Semitic expressions? How do we make sure that societies, not only that authorities take action, but also that, in society, people pay a price for being a racist, for being an anti-Semite?
Doctor, it's fine with titles. We're not so much about titles in Sweden, but Dr. Miriam.
Thank you. It's not a very easy question to answer. I'm also a lawyer, so it's easy for me to start thinking in legal terms, but maybe I won't bore you too much with that. But I can just say very shortly that from the municipality's side, we do not have the opportunity or possibility legally to act on individual cases. That is the responsibility of the principal and the school. What we can do is to support the schools, that they have the resources so that they know how to act and what to do. And as I said, we also, as we see this as a long term, of course, we need to work with taking action on what is happening, but long term and looking at education, the most important parts are promoting a society in which everyone is included and where racism is not accepted, and preventing racist expressions from developing. So we have to start at an early age, and at that, you cannot look at the children and ask questions of guilt and remorse. You have to look at children and ask, how can we help them? How can we as a society give them resources to orient themselves in a society which is multicultural, which is democratic, etc. So that is our primary focus. But then, of course, discrimination and harassment has to be addressed, and schools need to know what to do, how to act when situations of discrimination and harassment occurs. And that really, what will happen in that situation really depends on the situation in itself, but also on the age of the children involved, of course. I don't know if that is enough of a question. I mean, in the older ages, of course, it could be a question for police and criminal authorities, but that depends on them. It's not really, it's on someone else's table than the municipality. But we do what we can to give them the knowledge and resources so they know how to act in different situations.
Thank you so much for your answer. I will now pick two of the questions from the chat box, and then we have Ruti coming up, and I haven't forgotten about you, Fredrik. Two questions from AT, American Jewish Congress Israel, is Avital Leibovich is asking, is Sweden using intelligence means to combat anti-Semitic initiatives before they happen? Is there any cooperation between with the Israeli authorities? He also has a question on saying the last question, the numbers of anti-Semitic events are only increasing in past years. What does that mean with regard to the steps taken by the government? American Jewish communities, sorry, Avital, that's the problem with the acronyms and stupid moderators as me sometimes. American Jewish committee, sorry, and then I have a related question to that, and that is, how do you punish hate crimes in Sweden, more or less, saying that it's some Philippa Scholz asking that one. If we start with cooperation with Israel, yes, we try. We have distinguished guests in the room. We have MFA here. We have Yad Vashem. We have a great cooperation with Yad Vashem when it comes to student teachers that we are standing for. I think it's 2 weeks training here. We are first trained in Sweden and they come here. I think we have 100 teachers coming down here. We're also, as you heard, we also have Carol was here now from ADL. Sorry again, ADL. So we do have, and we are trying to learn from each other. We are now the presidents from 1st of March of the ERA, International Remembrance Holocaust Alliance. We just need to take a presidency there, and we hope that we will work with Israel. We have some plans to do things together, especially if I remember correctly on Holocaust distortion. So we are trying to learn from Israel and also take advantage of all the knowledge we have here. When it comes to punishment of hate crimes, yes, we do have a hate crimes legislation in Sweden. As in every country, there has been a challenge when it comes to how do we prove that it's a hate behind a certain crime. We are better today than before. We have better knowledge in the courts. We have better knowledge in the police. We have more prosecutions, but still it's challenging, I would say. And of course, for me as a victim to report to the police, the outcome of getting a result from the system is extremely crucial for me to even go to the police. So I think we have underreported hate crimes as well. Maybe a little bit better today, but that's just my gut feeling, to be honest. When it comes to everything is going back to American Jewish Committee, when it comes to the number of anti-Semitic events are only increasing. Not really true, actually. If you go back, take a 20 years perspective, the Forum for Living History in Sweden had a quite serious study on anti-Semitic tendencies in Sweden. It's actually going in the right direction, especially among the majorities, the majority society. We still have challenge with older people and also challenge with people from the Middle East, to be honest. But it's going in the right direction. With that said, it's no comfort for the girl that you were speaking about in a school in Malmo. If she's saying, this is my everyday life, and I say, it's better than it was 10 years ago, because then you were more, we still have a huge challenge, to be honest. We do have in Sweden, as in many other European countries, and also US today, I would say, a rise in anti-Semitic incidents when we have the Israel-Palestinian conflict coming up. Much more severe. I could speak a lot about this, but I won't. Much more severe 2014 with the Gaza war than last spring. We still had problems last spring, but if we compare the anti-Semitic events 2014, they were much more severe. Probably a lot of explanations behind it. I don't have the full answer, but we see a rise in anti-Semitism every time when the Palestinian conflict is up. Sorry for being long, but to honor some of the questions there. Fredrik, I'll give you a question because you have asked for the floor, and then I save a question from Barbara Posner that said, as a proud Zionist and a child of Holocaust survivors, I want to have the democratic right to walk around freely in town with my visible Star of David, and also to express my love and belonging to the state of Israel without being attacked. Does everyone in the panel agree that this is my right? I agree. Do you agree, Fredrik? But a more complicated question, is that the reality today, that you can walk freely? And then you can say whatever you want, but you need to answer the question as well. Challenge with a panel.
Obviously. I mean, I know, Barbara, we totally agree. And of course, just in the same way as you can show your identity as Palestinian or whatever, you have to do it as a Jew. And Israel is a Jewish homeland, and that's it. But that's not the issue here. The issue, what I wanted to address, that I kind of missed to address that you touched upon, Moshe David, and you also alluded to that. It's the problem. I mean, we can educate the kids, but actually it's the teachers and especially principals. And we saw it with this kid that you mentioned with this incident, or not incident, this terrible process that she was picked on, that there was a reluctancy to act out of fear of doing something wrong, and also lack of knowledge about what is anti-Semitism, and equating, sometimes even calling it, well, you can be against Israel, that's okay, but that's not the issue here. And so we need to educate principals, we need to educate the school leaders in Sweden much more. And we also need to discuss, instead of just having a paper on basic values, which is very popular in Sweden and as well as in other countries, we need to discuss how do we act on these values? What does these values mean? Which is very popular to talk about. We have values, but what does that mean in practical? So that's a work we have cut out in front of us if we want to keep this, being able to be Jewish, being able to say I support Israel, or I am Israeli, that some of our kids are, because they might have a parent who is from Israel. So so that's something we need to do, and I feel that we're not there yet, far from. I wanted to mention also, because you talked about the Holocaust and working with that, I didn't mention, what I should do is, as you know, the generation of the survivors are gone now, more or less. They're not going out to the schools. And we've had the witnesses in Sweden 30 years ago in Malmo, Lund, they formed an organization who went out to visit. They met hundreds and thousands of young kids to talk about their experiences, to inoculate them against revisionism and denial. And I think now many of them have left us, and some of them cannot do it anymore. So we, the kids, the grandchildren, are taking up the baton, so to speak, in a manner of speaking. So we're now going out to the schools, and we are actually now not only the second, but also the third, and even soon, hopefully the fourth generation, are talking about our relatives, our next of kin's experiences, which is very important. It's not the same thing, we really realize that. And this is something that we grapple with. How do we keep this memory alive, in a sense, beside the very fact that they are going over there and traveling to Poland and seeing for themselves. But we need to convey these stories. And this is something that we're working with in Malmo, and not only in Malmo, in other places too.
Thank you so much, Erik. I haven't forgotten about the rabbi. I never forget about the rabbi. But I will see, do we have more questions here? From the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ruti Cohen-Dar, that we're working quite closely with, especially when it came to Malmo. Thanks for great cooperation. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for organizing this, and I commend the Deputy Mayor. I think that the very first important step is recognizing you have a problem. That's about 80% of the solution, but we still have the 20% to go. So really, way to go, and I hope you keep up the good work. And also, Rabbi, I very much value what you do. I just want to point out two things that were said here, were said but not really looked at. One of them is the IRA definition. You have a problem, you want to define it. Sweden has adopted the IRA definition. I think every city in Sweden should adopt it and say, this is how we look at incidents, and this is how we translate them and recognize if this is an anti-Semitic event or not. This will help maybe normalize how you treat the data or how you look at the phenomena. It will help teachers to recognize what's going on in their classroom. I'm sure if the teacher was aware of what anti-Semitism is, she would have recognized the harassment at that girl right away. For me, the worst thing, as I see it when I look at Holocaust history, is indifference or lack of knowledge or lack of action. When somebody is a bystander, either from lack of knowledge, lack of interest, indifference, or not willing to take any action because you're afraid to, maybe the hatred or the violence will be targeting you. So this is one thing I would like to say, and I think it's interesting the research that Dr. Katzin has presented, and I think more of that should be made aware and looked at and translated into action items actually. And this is something that I would very much appreciate if we could get the data.
Looking at Yad Vashem. Do you want to say something before?
Regarding memory, is the guy to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Yossi Gevir, director at Yad Vashem. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Well, I mean, of course, I join everyone's praise for this very significant event, which I find is significant beyond the specific community of Malmo, which of course has its own importance, but I think there really are ramifications here for communities elsewhere in your country and around the world. My question is a question that we ask ourselves often at Yad Vashem. We have some answers, but I'd like to hear yours. And that is, to what extent can focus on historical event that happened 80 years ago continue to be relevant, and how it continues to be relevant in the contemporary context in which you find yourselves.
Yeah, it's good to be a moderator sometimes, because that wasn't an easy question. We'll end up the seminar with the rabbi and final deputy mayor, and then I will think a little bit if I have something at this moment. Sitting next to you, working for Yad Vashem, it's challenging. Rabbi, please. And, I'm going to throw a question for you as well, so you need to think a little bit. Is that a way forward to actually adopt the IRA definition for City of Malmö?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm going to actually take your question and then maybe connect it in. I think that in general, of course, you have much more knowledge on this, but I think in general in Malmo, we can say that there is some sort of block towards education, despite everything of the Holocaust, of the Shoah, despite everything we hear here. And that block is that generational gap between the personal story of Leah Gleitzman going out to the schools to what we are facing today. I go back to the word relatability. And how do you make the question of discrimination relatable and the Holocaust and education towards that, rather than make it education about the Holocaust? Because then it becomes its compartment, and then the child also, or the student, puts it into there, and as soon as they finish the test, they're done with it. I think the question of, I'm a bit hesitant regarding the report that I followed closely from the Forum for Living History, not because it's not credible, but because any type of report like that is based on, is not completely representative, because it can never be. And for me, the question is, what is the actual experience of the Jewish child in the school in Malmo? Not in the overall society, do we have an increase or decrease? Because it depends who you ask, and you're looking at a specific situation. Also, that was a national report, and then you can say what happened in Malmo in May 2021, for example, and what did it look like? For me, that's the much more important question. And the answer to that will only be an improvement once we see that we've activated civil courage, that we activate the people themselves to understand in a deep sense that this issue of discrimination is something which destroys their society, and therefore they need to act. And I'm very glad to see that in May, for example, there were imams out on the streets. And to ask them to say that Palestinian demonstrations are not okay is not something which is realistic. But they were out there saying, yes, it's okay to have your pro-Palestinian demonstration. That's your narrative. But the moment some people got on the stage and started once again, like in the past, yelling out, Khaybar, Khaybar, Itbach al-Yahud, they took them off the stage. We had an imam who was attacked physically We have an imam who is threatened for his life a few times because of these actions that they've been taking, because they are taking the message across. This is not about the Jews, this is about the society and our own children, as I've heard from them. And I feel that that is much more important in terms of saying, are we heading in a right direction? I'll also mention that Amanan now has the Swedish Heritage Fund, a governmental Amanan funded, has provided funding now for a digital project in which we are creating e-simulation of what we are doing in schools into modules that can be relatable to the different students. The first one that we're working on now is conspiracy theories, but to take the background material and create a scene, basically a game in which a kid steps onto a bus, sees a Magen David being torn off of a child, step back, let's learn about the situation. So that is one way, I think, to try to create something. Gaming, social media, we're creating a social media module in which the kids will be going through social media and then boom, they hit a conspiracy theory. So to make things relevant, I think, but also that it's not about the Shoah. It's what lesson we learn from the Shoah for you in the society that you want to live in today. And I think that the combination of work done by the Jewish community, by Malmo Stad, by social activists such as Siavosh, all working together, changing this messaging, I think is, in my mind, hopefully, but not naively, heading in a good direction.
Thank you so much. I concur with your conclusion when it comes to your question. Yes, one more point. As I said in the beginning, it's extremely important, I think, in all Holocaust education and commemorance to also see the story about anti-Semitism. That we have around the globe, and we have, as I said, did by Gothenburg University, they went through all the programs. And if they are correct saying that 40% of the programs in school concerning Holocaust, not only in Sweden, but around the globe, are not mentioning anti-Semitism, then we don't, we don't draw any lessons from history whatsoever. And just to underline the rabbi again, that even if you have a positive or negative trend, it doesn't matter for the individual that is afraid of going out in the streets with the David cross or the kippah. And that's where I hand over to the deputy mayor for some conclusions. And did you learn something? Is another question from you.
Well, I am very thankful for this opportunity because I did. I think this is a forum that we need to use more, coming together and exchanging the knowledge, the insights and the experiences we have. That is, I think, a key factor on really resolving the problems we have with anti-Semitism. I've written down a couple of things here that I would like to share before we end the seminar. The question regarding fear, I think is something we need to work more on because it leads to silence and indifference. And that is something that I believe that we need to work more proactively with. If we really believe in humanity and the experiences, the horrible experiences we've had in humanity, then I think that is also an answer to why it is relevant in the future. And it is our responsibility as human beings to our next generations. When it comes to digital environment, I think that is also a very, very important key factor to address because hate and conspiracy theories are today spreading in a different way than it was 60 or 70 years ago, and we need to work proactively there as well. I want to mention that we have developed in Malmo a digital hate tracker, actually, in cooperation with Nordic Safe Cities and our National Center for Preventing Violent Extremism. So we are working there to create an action plan against online hate in the cooperation with our civil society and the local police. And I think that is also very important to work simultaneously with. Then a little bit what Miriam answered regarding our national laws and which tools we have and do not have on a local municipal level. I think there it is very important that we build structures for preventive and proactive processes, but also concrete structures for dealing with and resolving our present situations of harassment and threats or violence that we have in and outside our schools. I think that is a key issue on looking at this as a joint action for long-term partnership. As a politician, I only have the mandate I have, and it's until the last of October. We have elections in September. So I also really want to emphasize the fact that the cooperation agreement that we have until 2023 would call out to the future political leaders of Malmö. Now I'm not included in it, that it shouldn't matter what political color or if it is from the left or right or the center, that this must be a prioritized question for Malmö's future. The question on the IRA definition. Now you have to correct me, Ambassador, if I'm wrong, but our government is adopted, yes. And through our constitution, we're all obliged of it or by it. We are 290 municipalities in Sweden, and it is very important that we do not in any ways turn from those decisions that have been taken on a governmental state level. And for the future, I think that this forum, this way of dialogue is for us important to learn more also in our city, how to combat anti-Semitism, and I would wish for the future that we have more of these opportunities. And I'm very thankful for the opportunity and for the invitation to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. It was some questions in the chat we didn't have time to answer, but that's a good seminar when we have more questions than answers. Hopefully we could have an answer. If any one of you really want an answer, you have Ludwig's email in the chat. So email in and you get the answer from the embassy. Finally, I would like to again apologize to American Jewish Committee, to ADL. Acronyms are challenging.
Getting into Jewish politics, that's very, very complicated.
Thank you so much, all participants online, the people that were here live, small but really distinguished group. We still are trying to be a little bit smaller because of COVID, but it's soon over. Thank you to Deputy Mayor. Thank you to Rabbi. Thank you for our other panelists. And even, when we see that we have terrible challenges, and even you could be reading about this girl again is really heartbreaking, and thinking about people needing anti-Semitism every day. We should also see that you could do something about it, and to listen to what you're trying to do and what you as Rabbi are doing. It's extremely inspiring, truly. And Siavash and Frederick and Miriam, thank you also for what you are doing. And thank you to people in the room that are for us, extremely important also. Inshallah, we're going to cooperate even more with Israel Ministry for Affairs, with Yad Vashem, with ADL, also with American Jewish Committee, maybe. Thank you so much for joining. And those of you that are here, of course, you can mingle afterwards. The rest of you, I say, you can't mingle, but maybe you can go over to Miriam and you can take up. See, I don't know. Did I forget one of the speakers? Maybe I forget. No. Who's here, Frederick? No, I didn't forget anyone, so I don't need to apologize. Yourself. Thank you to myself, and have a nice cup of coffee in Malmo. Thank you.
Bye-bye.